Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a huge question, one that really gets to the heart of how we trust information. What actually makes research good? We're about to dive into a major shift in how we answer that, especially when we're dealing with human stories, not just cold, hard numbers. I mean, seriously, think about it. The last time you read a study or an article, how did you decide if you believed it? What was that little gut check you did? That fundamental question is the launchpad for everything we're about to get into. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at this idea of research and reality. Then we'll talk about the classic way of measuring quality, what I'm calling the quantitative yardstick. After that, we're going to challenge that whole framework. And that's where we'll bring in a new standard of trust, and finally, see how it all works in practice. So let's start with this big idea, research and reality. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're staring at a giant spreadsheet or listening to a deeply personal interview. The goal is always the same. You've got to establish trust. How do we convince ourselves and everybody else that what we've found is actually credible? Now, when most of us think about trustworthy research, our brains kind of snap to a certain way of thinking. And that brings us to the quantitative yardstick. These are the standards we all grew up with from the world of numbers and data. In this world, a couple of ideas are king. The first one is reliability. Honestly, the best way to think about it is your bathroom scale, right? If you step on it 3 times in a row and get 3 totally different numbers, you're going to say this thing is useless. You don't trust it. And that right there is reliability. It's all about consistency. Will you get the same result every single time? And then you've got its partner, validity. Let's go back to that scale. It might be super reliable. It shows you the exact same weight every time you step on it. But what if it's always 5 pounds off? Well, then it's not valid. It's not accurately measuring your real weight. So validity is all about accuracy. Are we actually measuring the thing we think we're measuring? So you've got reliability and validity. For decades, these two have been the absolute gold standard, the bedrock of how we judge quantitative research. If a study has both, we trust it. Simple, right? Well, what happens when you're not measuring something simple like weight, but something a lot messier, like human experience? And that very question brings us to a major challenge to this whole framework. It opens up a completely different view of reality. And trust me, this is where things get really fascinating. See, a lot of qualitative researchers, they start from a place that just completely flips the script. They begin with this radical idea that there isn't one single objective reality just floating out there for us to go and measure. Instead, they argue that what we call reality is actually shaped and constructed by our own perceptions of it. And that's the whole problem, isn't it? If you believe that reality is subjective, then how in the world can you measure something against a single external truth? The whole concept of validity, which absolutely depends on that external truth, it starts to crumble. It's like trying to measure a cloud with a ruler. The tool just doesn't fit the job. So, hold on. This doesn't mean that qualitative research is less rigorous or that it's just people making stuff up. Not at all. It just means we need a whole new language to even talk about what makes it good. And that's how we get to this, a new standard of trust, with a vocabulary built specifically for a world of subjective understanding. And the parallels here are just so clear and elegant. It's like a direct translation. So instead of talking about reliability, we start focusing on dependability. And where we used to hunt for validity, the new goal is credibility. You see? We're not throwing out the idea of quality, we're just retranslating it for a whole new context. Okay, so let's break this new framework down. First up is dependability. That's our new reliability. It asks, is the research process logical? Is it well documented? Could someone follow our steps? Then you have credibility, the partner to validity. This is huge. It asks, is our interpretation believable and authentic, especially to the people who actually lived the experience? Then it adds 2 more powerful ideas. Transferability, which asks if these findings could give us some insight in other situations. And finally, confirmability, which is a check on us, the researchers, to make sure our findings are really based on the data, not our own biases. Together, they create this really complete picture of what makes research trustworthy. And here's the absolute key difference. You don't get a score on these things. There's no such thing as a credibility score of 9 out of 10. These aren't metrics you just calculate at the end. No, they are qualities that you have to demonstrate and argue for throughout your entire research process. It's a fundamental shift. Trust isn't measured, it's built. All right, so this isn't just a bunch of fancy academic talk. This stuff has real-world consequences for how we do our work. Let's pull this out of the clouds and see how this moves from theory to practice and why this all really, really matters. Okay, let's put you in the driver's seat. Imagine you're on a project and you're asked to interview people about, say, their experience with a new app. After you've gone out, gathered all those stories, and analyzed them, your final, most critical job isn't to prove some kind of statistical validity. It's to build a compelling, rock-solid case for the credibility and dependability of your interpretation. And this is the big mental shift. Your goal is no longer to be a treasure hunter digging for one single objective truth buried under the ground. Instead, your mission is to be more like a map maker, carefully navigating the complex, beautiful web of human experience and presenting a well-supported, authentic, and truly trustworthy interpretation of the multiple realities you find there. So, at the end of the day, this whole new standard of trust leaves us with a really powerful question for any work we do that involves trying to understand people. It forces us to stop and ask ourselves, what kind of truth are we actually looking for? Is it a single, measurable fact, or is it a deep, authentic understanding of human experience? Because as we've just seen, the answer to that one question, it changes absolutely everything.